Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Behind the Business on the Boise Beat, where we dive into the stories of inspiring entrepreneurs. And today we're thrilled to have Emily Smith. She's the founder of Emily Elizabeth Home, and she's going to be joining us to talk about her impressive business that's spanning currently 2 key locations in Portland and Boise. With over 1.2 million in sales and a sprawling 7,000 square foot warehouse, her journey in the world of home decor and lifestyle is nothing short of remarkable. And what makes her story even more compelling is her pivot after 2 decades in the photography business. So today, we're going to uncover the resilience and the vision behind Emily Elizabeth Home. So without further ado, let me bring her on board here. Emily, how you doing this morning?
Hello, doing good.
Sweet. Well, thanks for taking some time to jump on here and join me. And I'm excited not only to let audiences hear a little bit more about your story, but glean from some of the experiences that you've had as well, because obviously you have a track record here. And part of the intention of this series here is to inspire other entrepreneurs that are on their own journey here. And so we're kind of sharing the wealth, sharing the wisdom, right? Sharing the experiences, et cetera, and insights. And so I want to talk to you first off about some of your successes that you've had, transitioning into home decor and what you're in right now, and staging from a successful photography studio. And you've kind of built a thriving home decor business here, right? So give me the nuts and bolts, if you would, for anybody that really doesn't understand what that is, so we can understand what you do. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, I started off as a photographer, and I worked with families creating personal artwork. So I would create big canvases that we'd put on the wall, and I worked in people's homes. So I created art that would kind of work with their home decor. So I've always kind of had a little bit of a style.
Yeah.
But after 20 years, family portraiture, you had to be available on the weekends and evenings when families were available.
Yeah.
And when I had kids, the older they got, I just really wanted to be part of their soccer games and it just got too crazy. So I needed something that I could be available when I was available, not when other people were available. So it was really hard transitioning, because so many people were like, but you're our photographer. How do you? And I started a long time ago. I shot a Hasselblad. Actually, it's on my shelf back there, but like a medium format camera.
Okay.
So it wasn't like a digital. I really kind of,
You're taking it back.
So, but after 20 years, I just was done. I had burned out, and I had to come to realize that I had to find something else creative that I wanted to do. So there was a building on my portrait studio. I owned 2 buildings, and one of them next door became vacant. And so someone had told me about Airbnb, and I thought, well, gosh, what do I have to lose? I had all kinds of props. So I got it up and running, got it furnished, put it on Airbnb. And the next morning I woke up to like 12 reservations. And this is in the beginning when no one knew what Airbnb even was. So through Facebook, people got to see, oh, wow, she decorates. And so then someone's like, can you do my Airbnb? Can you stage my house? And that was kind of the beginning of my new pivot.
Yeah. So you kind of say, I don't believe in happenstances per se, but in a way, you kind of fell into it, right? You just saw an opportunity, you seized it, and you didn't really see the whole picture of what was going to manifest there in the coming years. And all of a sudden, now you find yourself into a new arena.
Right.
So jumping into a new arena, and you're trying to figure out the ropes with things like, was that difficult for you to get your feet under you and realize, okay, I'm doing something in a similar space, in a similar vein, but it's definitely different. So I got to learn some new things. I got to pick up some new skills. I got to use some new tools. Like, talk to me about that experience of going from you being in your lane, you knowing what you're doing 100,000%, and now you're in something that's kind of similar, but you're still having to learn.
One thing that is exciting for me is change. So being able to shift and pivot, and even with photography, like photographing families and creating different sets and trying new locations. So it was exciting. It's always scary though, because I'm like, okay, I'm going to stage a house. I have no idea what I'm doing or how to even get the furniture or to acquire. But I was thinking about my journey earlier this morning. And one thing that I think a lot of people go, okay, I'm going to do a staging business, and they get a business loan, and then they get a bunch of storage units full of new furniture. I'm like, I didn't have a bunch of money that I could pull from.
Yeah.
So I slowly transitioned. So I literally found a dresser on the side of the road and went to Goodwill and
Wow.
took stuff from my house. And that was the first stage. And then I
Wow.
used my garage. And then I got 1 storage unit, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. And then there was a home stager that was selling a bunch of stuff in her warehouse. And I go, what if I bought everything in your warehouse and took over your space? And she was like, well, that's going to be a bunch of money. I'm like, well, try me.
Yeah.
And so I paid her over
Uh-huh.
I think it was like a 4-month period. I paid her, and then I had a warehouse and I had all this.
Wow.
And then I doubled that warehouse. And then last year we doubled to 7,000 square feet, which I never in my wildest dreams would think that I would have a 7,000 square foot warehouse. But we staged 96 houses last year in Portland. So
Nice.
it's like you got to have space. And then here in Boise, I have a much smaller space. But again, it's finding things like, okay, for example, a couple weeks ago, my assistant goes, so what's on the schedule next week? And I go, oh, well, we got asked to stage a house. She goes, okay, well, what are we going to use to stage it? I go, no worries. Like, I've already hopped on Facebook Marketplace. I bought a couple couches. I'll go pick up the coffee table. Like, I'll pull this from my house. We'll make it work. Like, I think just making it work is kind of the exciting part to me. And maybe that's not exciting to other people.
Yeah.
But I think it's exciting. But you do that until I don't always need to pull my couch from my living room. I mean, at some point my family's like, really? But when the kids were little and I did this, I'm like, it's a gymnastics studio in the living room now. And they were like super excited. Now my husband at the time was like, what are you doing? You're taking our couch again?
Yeah. I see improvisation all over that.
Yeah.
Like you're improvising as you go along. You're not trying to have the whole thing figured out right there at that moment, but somehow that you're going to figure it out. Somehow that you're going to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so it reminds me of really like learning this art form, if you would. I see it as an art form of learning how to let go of something good in order to pursue something greater. And you don't always know what that's going to entail and what it's going to take. You just know you're built for it. Is that safe to say?
Right. There's a book, Gretchen Rubin wrote The Happiness Project, and she got her law degree and worked for Sandra Day O'Connor and like this whole thing, and she wasn't happy. And so I think I read that book at that time and I was like, I'm just burned out. I'm not happy. I had to be able to shift and pivot and change. And even this last year, I've had to really pivot and change. So we did 1.2 last year and we did way less this year, but we're way more profitable this year. But part of it was Airbnb. We're down 30%.
Wow.
I mean, Airbnb's across the board. It's just so saturated. So it's like, okay, well, if we're not doing that, so we're helping people move into assisted living, and we're helping declutter and organize, and we're helping bachelor pads. So it's really just constantly shifting and changing. There's no like given that it's all going to work out and be,
Yeah. And, speaking of things shifting and changing and not having it ever go necessarily according to plan, talk to me about maybe a low point or some of the low points that you've experienced where you had to close a particular chapter to go after something else in your life. Like you made a huge pivot after 20 years in photography to go in this lane over here. And that's a change. And while you say you were burned out from the other one and you were ready to move on, like there had to have been some challenges, right? Some really maybe dark moments that we don't always talk about and people don't get to hear about, right? Like share with me and share with people.
Yeah,
one of those.
For sure, there's definitely low points. I think that after COVID, business didn't really slow down for us, but I lost my team because they're like, well, the governor said to stay at home and we can't work for you. So I'm loading and unloading a U-Haul by myself. I had 5 employees at the time and they all just vaporized. I mean, they were gone. So I was like, okay, so rebuilding a team, and I've had to rebuild a team several times. So I think that's hard, but I think that you can take challenges along the way. Like, so even growing up, I ran for student council and I didn't make it. And I was in 9th grade and I remember being devastated, but I've gone on to be the state president of the Photography Association and I've been the president of 3 different associations. So, or like, I think it was in 9th grade again, that I didn't make the run club. You had to run under a 10-minute mile, and it was like an
Mhm.
after school club, and I didn't make it. And I'm like, I've gone on to run a marathon and 5, half marathons and run relays and stuff. So I think just sometimes taking that challenge that you didn't get and really turning it. And I think no matter what it is, if you can learn from it, it's okay. So like
Mhm.
at the beginning of my design career, I decorated this lady's house. It was a great experience. At the end, she turned around and sued me,
Mhm.
which was
Wow.
not ideal.
Uh-huh.
And I lost. And the judge was like, you need to keep better track of your inventory. And literally, I look back and I'm like, the lady was crazy. Like, turns out she had sued like 7 other companies. But what I learned was that I really needed to track my inventory. So
Mhm.
it's like, as long as I learned from that experience and was
Yeah.
able to gain knowledge from it, we keep incredible track of the inventory now. So
Yeah.
I think learning from any low spot is a big deal.
Yeah. No, it's huge. I think especially when we kind of live in a culture where people expect things just to turn out the way that they want it right away. And especially somebody that might be going from a traditional 9 to 5 and jumping into an entrepreneurial space, right? They expect that things kind of turn around for them as quickly as a 2 week paycheck. And
Right.
things don't happen that way. So it's like, okay, I think about who is it that you need to become as far as mentality, character, in order to sustain yourself through this new transition, because it's not the same game. We've kind
No.
of been taught, how to live life in a certain way, but once you step into this arena, the
Right.
game's a lot different, right?
Right. And marketing constantly. Like no matter what business you're in, someone's like, well, my business is really slow. Well, have you reached out to the last 10 people you worked with to
Mhm.
ask them if they needed more services?
Right.
No. And so, in fact, this happened the other day. So, business typically slows down for us like Christmas, New Year's, and then the housing market kind of picks back up after the first of the year. So, it's a little slow at the end of the year, which is fine. We know it's coming, but still, I'm like, it would be nice to have money coming in this time of year.
Hmm.
So, I have a little staff meeting and I go, what can we do to, you know, and Christy goes, well, what about this realtor, Kimberly? Why don't you text her and see if she has anything up and coming? We haven't worked with her in a while. And I go, I'm going to text her right now. I text her right now. And she said, I actually have a house for you next week. When can
Wow.
you guys do it? And I was like, are you kidding? So
Yeah.
several times I've just gone through my list of realtors and I text them, hope you're well, wondered if you had any upcoming projects. I did this earlier this year and we got 6 jobs out of it. So I think sometimes people sit around and they're like waiting for the phone to ring. You have to
Hmm.
go
Go
get
do
it.
it. Yeah.
Or if I have a slow week, I'll reach out to property managers or to other people in the field, even other designers or stagers, and just have coffee with them because you never know what you can glean
Right.
from that. I met a stager locally and we just connected and we talked about business. And then at one point, I was supposed to stage a house and I got really sick. I had COVID or the flu or something. And I called her and she was able to do the job for me. So
Um,
you just
mm,
never know like what kind of connection you can have that will make a difference. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. I like to say that, skills or your skills and abilities might get you an invitation to the door, but it's the relationships that actually get you a seat at the table and keep you there. And
Absolutely.
I really do believe that's so true over the years, that relationships are huge and they're key to everything. So
Yes. Yes.
definitely agree with you on that one.
Right.
One thing that comes to mind here, because you're mentioning some wins that you get under your belt, and I want to talk to you about your mentality when it comes to getting a win under your belt and you're achieving some success. How do you personally navigate that to where you're not living necessarily in the moment of the high ride, and then that kind of jades you from knowing that you got a season coming up ahead that isn't going to be that way? So in other words, you might be killing it in summer, but winter's coming, right? And so how do you carry that mentality from summer all the way through the year, so you don't get too ahead of yourself, but you use that to ride the momentum year after year after year, if
I
that
don't do
makes
that
sense?
very well.
Yeah. You're like, that's
I'm like,
not
let's
me.
ride the high. Let's do this. And I'm like, why is it dead? What is going on? I don't know what to do. This is crazy. I do know it's coming, but I'm a time filler, which
Uh-huh.
can be a good thing and a bad thing. I have a couple close friends, and we have this video chat that we do, and the one gal was like, we all have our vices. Like, I drink wine. This gal has edibles. And then there's you, Emily. And I was like, I don't have any vices. And they're like, you fill your time. And I was like, oh, geez. And even my fiance is like, you're a time filler. But I think that keeps me going. And so like, if there's nothing on the books, hey, do you want to have coffee? Like, I just want to be doing. I'm a doer, even cleaning the garage or cleaning the warehouse, or I don't know. I keep busy that way. So yeah. Riding the wave, I don't do very well, but we can't do everything super well. And the other thing that I have done well. So actually in college, I flunked out of Business 101, and I was really pissed because I liked the class. I liked the teacher. I went to every class. And at the end of it, I went to him and I was like, listen, it was like test taking, and I'm not the best test taker. I go, I don't, what can I do about my grade? He goes, well, I don't know. I can't even remember what we did. But he said, what do you want to do with yourself? I said, I want to be a photographer. He goes, great. You go be a photographer and hire everyone else to do everything that you don't want to do. Yeah. And I'm like, you're a jerk. I remember walking out of his office in my Doc Martens, my overalls, and I was pissed. I'm like, are you serious? That was not the answer that I wanted. And then like 5 years later, I look back and I was like, you know what? I hired a landscaper. I hired a bookkeeper. I hired a tax accountant. I hired a retoucher. I hired all these people with things that I wasn't good at, because what I was good at was marketing and sales and photography and working with the people. And an interesting thing, like with the photography studio, I never learned how to use Photoshop. To this day, I don't know how to use Photoshop because it didn't make me any money. It doesn't make me any money. So I would delegate that. So I always had a full-time person doing Photoshop, which I would pay way less than my value was way better doing other stuff. So I think that is an important thing. And even now, like Christmas is coming up and I hired my employees to wrap presents. I mean, that sounds crazy, but there's so much going on. It was like a little thing that just helped like delegate. So.
Yeah. That reminds me of the 80-20 principle. I was actually reminded of this book up here. Don't know if you can see it. It's called Mind Shift.
Yeah.
And it speaks to that. Anybody that's listening, if you haven't checked out that book and you want to learn how to maximize yourself, you definitely need to check that out. It's called Mind Shift, but it speaks to that principle there. You're focusing on the 20% that's yielding you the greatest result, and that's going to, yield you the greatest results going forward. And so what I see you doing, Emily, over the years is you're learning how to continually do what they call 10xing, right? You're jumping to that next level where you're focusing on that arena that's meant for you, that you're meant to do. And what do you do with the rest? You find people that are great at what they do to do that.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with that, right?
Right.
You don't want to mow your lawn? Hire somebody to mow your lawn.
Yeah. And when I moved so I moved about 2.5 years ago from Portland to Boise, never looked back. The political climate was just too much. I just couldn't do it anymore in Portland. But I was born and raised there. So it was kind of a transition. But when I left, I hired someone that was amazing and I paid her well. And she has run my company. And I think that sometimes people get threatened by who they hire. Like, oh, well, she, it's like, no, like I like to hire people that are better than me. Like, what if she decorates better than me? That's amazing. That's great for the company. Exactly. Whereas some people go, oh, well, I'm the decorator and I can't hire another decorator. Well, you can't be all things to all people. So, and another valuable business lesson was in June, I went to Italy and my best friend got married. We took 2 weeks and I didn't really like log on to my computer at all. I didn't check any email and my staff knew what was happening. And when I came back, all the billing, all the like customer relations was taken care of.
Nice.
And I don't do any contracts or billing or scheduling anymore. And it's funny because my admin was like, I'm sorry. And I was like, this is the best thing that has ever happened to me because it freed me of that world. But had I not left, I don't know that I would have released the reins. Like it kind of took a little bit to go, okay, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to follow up, but they're doing a great job. And now having them do that technical stuff that again, doesn't really make me money and doing other stuff is a bonus. So
wow, that's so good.
I'm planning my next vacation.
Yeah.
What else can I delegate, right?
Right. Well deserved. Yeah, exactly. Well, if there were to be, because you dropped a ton of golden nuggets here of wisdom here, and so I hope you're picking this up if you're listening here. But if you were to leave anybody with the final piece of advice or insight or wisdom to an entrepreneur that's listening, that maybe they're facing their own low point in their journey right now, or maybe they're looking at a major shift and pivot in what they're currently doing right now, like what would you leave them with as some insight?
Mm. Whoa, there's so many. There's
I
so many
know.
things. I think one of the most valuable things that I do is I get up at 5:45 and I get up before anyone else is up. The dog is up, but I have my coffee. I write my to-do list. I look at my goals and I just really hone in on what do I need to do to achieve this stuff. And sometimes things can seem super overwhelming, like a
Hmm.
marketing plan that
Hmm.
we're working on or social media. But I think that just taking it baby steps, like I've always said baby steps. Like I could go to a seminar, it's super overwhelming, come back, rewrite my notes and just break it down. Like, okay, I can just do this one thing today. Okay,
Hmm.
tomorrow, what's one thing that I can do? So I think breaking it down and not being afraid to like reach out for help. Call a
Hmm.
friend and be like, "Hey, what do you think of this? How
Yeah.
can I think people sometimes as an entrepreneur can feel isolated.
Yeah.
Um, and it can be isolating at the top. You start becoming successful and then it just, so I think really like turning to your insight and journaling and to-do lists and really reflecting on
Yeah.
what you, or maybe even like writing a list, like what have I done good? What,
Mm.
not getting down on yourself. Did
Yeah.
you ever read The Gap and the Gain?
I haven't. Uh-uh.
The basics of it is like the gain, like, okay, you set a goal to make $1 million and then you only made 750.
Mm.
People look at that gap and they're like, well, I didn't make it to a million. But
Mm.
they forget to look at you brought in
Mhm.
$750,000. Or
Right.
you set a goal to lose 20 pounds and you've lost 10 pounds. And they're like,
Mm.
I have another 10 pounds to lose. So it's like celebrating the fact that you lost that 10 pounds.
Right.
People can beat up on themselves. So
Yeah.
celebrating the
That's
little
a
win.
great reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And as a final plug, where can people find you at? If they're a realtor, if there's somebody in that sector looking to get their spot staged, their property staged,
Yeah.
or the Airbnb side of it, or just decor in general, where can people find you?
Yeah. At our website, emilyelizabethhome.com. We have a blog that we've been consistent. My word for 2024 is consistent.
Yeah.
So get my blog. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, and we have a YouTube channel as well. So yeah.
Nice. That's wonderful. Well, Emily, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much. I'll be sure to circle back with you because I want to keep picking your brain some more. I could tell that you got
Sounds good.
tons more to unpack that
There's
we haven't been
more.
able to crack into.
There's
There's
more.
more. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Thank
Bye bye.
you.
And for those of you that are tuning in right now, you've joined in to Behind the Business with the Boise Beat. My name is Gordie Tamayo. Until next time.